Very excited to be here and share with our grads and future grads today. This again is Sean Glaze, and today I want to share with you what winning teammates do differently. And the first thing that I want to include as part of the presentation is that what I'm going to share today, well, it's a whole lot like deodorant. See, everybody thinks that the information that I'm going to give is something the person next to them needs a whole lot more. But the truth is, when you look at jobs and you look at being a great teammate, one of the major issues that you will find virtually in any industry is that people are hired for technical skills, but then they're fired for interpersonal skills. And I found that out not in business, but in basketball. I was a high school basketball coach for 2 decades. And as a coach, just like as a manager or a leader in any industry, oftentimes you would put people on your team based upon their skills. And then that team would sometimes suffer if skills are all that you focused on. So as a future employee or future employer, future leader on whatever team that you're going to be a part of, one of the things I would encourage you to consider is the importance of being a winning teammate. Now, having coached for 20 years, I have to share the obligatory phrase, there's no I in team. And it sounds great, right? Again, you've probably heard that for years yourself. And having coached for 20 years, I can tell you, I completely disagree. Every athlete I ever coached was first and foremost an individual. Every person on whatever team you're going to be a part of is first and foremost an individual more concerned with him or herself. And so how do you take those individuals and make them a team? Well, that's the important thing, and that's what makes you a valuable teammate, when you see yourself as a small, significant, contributing part of something larger than yourself. And being a great teammate is important, because here's what employers know. There was a study done just a few years ago by Harvard Business School, and they found that toxic employees have an incredibly negative impact upon a workplace. Toxic employees can cost companies over $10,000 of profit each year. The difference is if you focus on being a superstar employee, a winning teammate. Winning teammates in that same study were found to actually gain companies about $5,000 profit each year. And so that's one of the most important points that I want to share with you today. So you're working as you gain your degree, as you gain your experience, as you get your background and technical expertise. Talent is important, but whether it's basketball or business, talent is absolutely essential, but it is never sufficient. That's why I wrote the book, The 10 Commandments of Winning Teammates, because teammates aren't always the ones who are the most skilled. Teammates are always the ones who are the most experienced. But winning teammates are the ones that have the positive impact on the culture that they're a part of. Winning teammates are people that do the things that bring others together and provide the results the team necessarily wants. That's why I started my business, Great Results Team Building. That's why I go around the canal sharing with corporate groups and athletic groups and organizations in order to help them build a far more effective and profitable culture. So I want to begin with a question. Who is the best teammate that you ever had? I imagine you're already thinking of someone. And that someone that's already popped into your mind as the best teammate you ever had, whether it's in athletics or otherwise, is somebody that probably exhibited one of these traits. See, the 10 commandments of winning teammates are the things that if you'll focus on these 10 things, regardless of industry, you'll be a winning teammate, and you'll ultimately have a far more successful team and far more enjoyable culture to be a part of. And rather than sharing all 10, because our time is limited, what I wanted to focus on today are the 3 of those commandments that would be most relevant to you as you begin your journey. And the first of those is to claim personal responsibility for results. What are you doing to point the finger at yourself rather than at others? When things go right or when things go wrong, are you someone who actually takes ownership? See, as an athletic coach, You would oftentimes see athletes point their finger somewhere else. Something bad would happen, and automatically the finger would go to another teammate. And I learned a question that I want to share with you that I think is incredibly powerful in terms of inspiring ownership, not just in basketball, but in any business. And that question is this: what part of my leadership led to that outcome? Whatever results you're a part of, what part of your leadership led to that? And instead of pointing your finger elsewhere, how can you take ownership? How can you see the part that you played, the ripples that your actions had, and how that influenced the outcomes that you and your team experience? If you want to be a winning teammate, it's not just about individual contributions. It's about what are the team's results? What part of your leadership led to the outcome that you will eventually be experiencing? And one of the best examples I can share of that is a rearview mirror. See, as a coach, oftentimes you'd come off the court, and whether it's a good play or a bad play, players would look at each other, and the question that they would have for themselves or for each other is, whose responsibility was that? And the best teammates would always point the finger at themselves. Now, rearview criticisms are far different than encouragements and reminders. A rearview criticism is when you're looking out the mirror and looking backwards instead of forwards. The problem is on the court or in your industry, looking backwards doesn't change anything. So if somebody missed a block out in basketball and allowed an offensive rebound, you couldn't go back and change that. But oftentimes teammates would point at others and say, why didn't you block out? You should have. And those are rear view criticisms. Those are looking backwards to criticize instead of looking forwards and taking ownership for the events that occurred. See, a winning teammate wouldn't look backwards and point and blame. A winning teammate would look forward and ask themselves, what part of my leadership can influence this outcome? Winning teammates are going to look ahead and take the initiative to say before the offensive rebound occurred. They'll give reminders and encouragements to their teammates. Make sure that you block out. Hey, step into contact. Make sure we get this one. So how can you take ownership? How can you take responsibility for the outcomes that you will eventually be a part of? Well, it starts with not pointing blame at anyone other than yourself. And the more you own the results, the more power you give yourself. Because if you're pointing your finger somewhere else, you're becoming a victim instead of pointing the finger at yourself and taking the power back into your control so you can, through the initiative of reminders and encouragements, help your other teammates be far more effective themselves. Winning teammates are positive and proactive instead of rotten and reactive. So that's the first of the three things that I want to share with you today. The second is this: after you've learned to claim personal responsibility for results, one of the most important things you can do as a teammate is to be aware of and to encourage others. Why is that important? Well, connections in any company are incredibly important. Connecting not just to a compelling common goal, but connecting to each other. And the people you connect to end up being a huge part of your success. So you need to be aware of who they are. What are their dreams and challenges and personalities? And how can you encourage them to be more successful as part of the team that you're on? Why are those connections important? Well, it turns out that a study from just a few years ago showed that nearly 9 out of 10 workers said work relationships affected the quality of their life. Think about the number of hours that you'll be investing in this job, in this team that you eventually become a part of. Those connections you'll make are incredibly vital to the quality of your life. And so you want to be aware of and encourage others. You want to make sure you make those connections. And one of the most important things you can do in order to make and maintain and strengthen relationships is to focus upon trust. And so what I'd like to share with you is this part: to be more aware of and encourage others is to help you understand what is it that builds trust, because trust is going to be the foundation of any quality relationship. I believe there are three legs on a stool of trust. And trust is nothing more than a positive assumption that you or others make based upon their previous experiences. What have they seen you do in the past? That is what informs them to make assumptions about your future. And you're the same way with others. So, how can you actually, instead of taking years or months, how can you actually, in minutes, help to establish and begin to strengthen trust? I think there are three things. The first thing that builds trust is competence. That's why you're in preparing. That's why you've been in internships. That's why you've taken the time to gain the experience you have, is to build competence. And you've got to be willing to be bad long enough to get better. But competence, being able to do the job that you've been hired for, is obviously one of the most important parts of building trust. I would not have somebody playing point guard for me that couldn't dribble the ball. Similarly, you're going to be hired for that technical skill, and your competence is absolutely vital, but it's never sufficient. That's where the other two legs come in. The second leg, where you can actually build trust, is to illustrate concern for others. And the most important word is to illustrate, to demonstrate, to show, because you believe you're a good person. You know internally what your intentions are, but people only see what you do. So you're going to be judged not on intentions, but on your actions. What are you saying or doing to show that you truly care about and consider others? I remember having taken my daughter when she just turned 16 to purchase a car. She was really excited about getting the VW Beetle. And we went and drove a used vehicle, and she was excited. And I sat down across the table from a very experienced and competent salesperson. You could tell he had sold a whole lot more cars than I had bought. He was good at his job. Competence was not an issue. But throughout our conversation, as I sat there, it was obvious he was far more concerned about his commission than he was about my daughter. And we didn't buy that vehicle because I didn't trust him, because I didn't trust the vehicle, because he was trying to sell me something that I feel like he had shown or illustrated concern for us. And it's the same way in your relationships. What can you do to demonstrate concern for others? The third part of that leg, the third leg in that stool of trust, is the commitments that you keep. Every day you keep promises. Many of them are unspoken commitments to make sure that you're on time and that you show your respect for other people's time. What are the commitments that you're expected to keep? What are the items that you need to make sure you get to others that they're expecting? Because if someone expects something and you don't deliver it, that is obviously a betrayal of part of the trust. So you want to make sure that in every opportunity, you're keeping the commitments that you make. Those are the three things that build trust. Can you illustrate that you're competent? Can you illustrate to others that you're concerned about them? And can you maintain the commitments that you make and always deliver what's expected? And even better, can you over deliver? Those are the things that lead to not just being aware of and encouraging others, but building relationships that are full of trust. Which leads to the third item that I'd like to share with you today. This is the last of the 10 commandments that I'll be able to share with you. Obviously, there are 7 others that are available in the book. But the third thing I want to share with you that is incredibly important, regardless of industry, is to frequently share appreciation and thanks. You know, when I was a high school basketball coach, I taught literature. And one of my favorite writers was Mark Twain. And one of my favorite Twain quotes is this. He said, "I can live for 2 months on a good compliment." My guess is you're thinking now about somebody who's complimented you in the past, about something you did. See, the truth is, every job is valuable on a team, but not every job is visible. And even when you feel invisible, when somebody takes the time to make you feel seen, it's amazing how much more you're willing to invest as part of that team. I don't think that 2 months is an accurate description of how long you can live on a good compliment. I think that compliments and appreciation are something that don't just build trust because it shows your concern for others, but it's something that absolutely goes a long way to building a camaraderie on a team. The problem was, as a coach, I didn't always do it very well. As a young coach, I actually waited to give compliments until the banquet. And that's a long season to live through when you're not hearing appreciation along the way. But when I did give appreciation, when a player did make a great play on the court, or come down with a big rebound, or set a good screen, I would say, good job. Turns out that's not a very good idea as a teammate or as a leader. So I would tell you, as you go into whatever job that you're going to be a part of, to outlaw the use of good job. So when somebody came off the court and I said, good job, the issue was they didn't know what I was congratulating. And if as a good teammate, you understand that what gets rewarded is what gets repeated, you want to make sure that people know specifically what it is they did well so that you can have them repeat that. Vague praise invites vague efforts. So as a teammate, when you respond to criticize someone, point the finger at yourself, take ownership, make sure you're building trust. And when you say something to compliment someone, make sure it's something far more specific than good job. Let them know exactly what they did and the impact that it had on the team. Hey, thanks so much for getting me this report. It helped me to turn in the proposal, and the client could not be more happy. And you were a huge part of that. Thank you. That's a specific thank you. In basketball terms, it was important, but it's just as important, obviously, where you're going to be. See, in basketball, it started with Dean Smith and North Carolina University, where years ago, decades ago, he taught his players to point to the passer. So the reality is that no one scores or succeeds alone. Whatever success you're going to have is going to be because someone else helped you and provided opportunities or provided the resources for you to enjoy that success. So when somebody scored a layup, when somebody made a three, their job as a North Carolina basketball player was to point to the passer to acknowledge and appreciate the person that made their success possible. And my guess is somewhere in the shadows is somebody that has helped you enjoy the spotlight. Every job is valuable, but not every job is visible. What can you do to point to a passer to make sure that you let someone know through a compliment or a specific thank you of the influence they had on the success that you're now enjoying? So those are the three things from the 10 Commandments winning teammates, the three that are probably the most relevant to you right now. Claim personal responsibility for results, be aware of and encourage others, build trust, and then to share appreciation and thanks. Now, if you'd like to enjoy the book or to learn about all 10 of the commandments, I'd like to offer you something for having sat through and listened to some of this presentation. And in addition to the book, you can actually get over 50 other helpful resources to help you be a winning teammate. So if you like the audio version of the book, all you need to do is to take out your phone and you can text the word teamwork to 444-999. Again, to receive an audio version of the book, The 10 Commandments of Winning Teammates, so that you can be a winning teammate. And to also have access to over 50 resources so you can be a far better teammate on the team that you become a part of, just text teamwork to 444-999. And I'll leave you with this. If you were to rate yourself today, going into whatever industry you're going to be a part of, on a scale of 1 to 5, how often do you claim responsibility for results? On a scale of 1 to 5, how often are you intentional about being aware of and encouraging others? On a scale of 1 to 5, how often do you share appreciation and thanks with those that make your life far more successful and give you the opportunity to have the impact that you want? And I want to leave you with one final question to consider as you go into whatever job or industry you're going to be a part of as a winning teammate. I asked you at the beginning, who was the best teammate you ever had? And your job is far more significant than the technical skills that you've achieved. Your job is to someday have someone else say that you were the best teammate they ever had. That is just a few of the things that winning teammates do differently. Appreciate your attention. Hope that you've enjoyed and had a couple of takeaways. And Don, what questions might you have right now?
Hey, Sean, great questions coming in. First one right off the bat coming in from Mary is, what's our role in terms of identifying other toxic employees who are potentially poisoning that corporate culture? What can we do to help identify who those individuals are, and how do we bring them back into the fold, perhaps even change their behavior?
Wow, what a powerful question. First, thanks, Mary, for the question. And just to repeat the question, as I understand it, what can we do as teammates to bring those who may be toxic employees back into the fold and to refocus them and to gain their engagement? And I'll tell you, there is, I guess, a pretty simple answer and explanation, which is far more difficult in terms of implementation in the workplace. Here's what I mean. Knowing and doing are two very different things, whether it's on the court or in a corporate culture. Culture is a very common buzzword these days. And culture, for all the many definitions that other individuals might share, culture is nothing more than this. Culture is the behaviors that are allowed to be repeated in an organization. Culture is what people do. So if culture is behaviors, behaviors are always going to be the result of beliefs. Beliefs are the result of awareness. And awareness is going to be the result of people's experiences. What you experience improves your awareness changes your beliefs inform your behaviors, and behaviors become culture. So if you want to change your culture, the first thing you want to do is to not attack someone's beliefs, because they're going to hold on to those based upon their experiences. Your job is to give them a different experience. Maybe tell a story that has helped to inform your awareness. Maybe give them a chance to experience something as an activity together as a group that's going to actually open their eyes to a new awareness. And with changed awareness comes changed beliefs and behaviors. One thing I would caution you, though, in doing is recognizing that as much as you can be a positive influence by your example, again, leadership is spelled EXAMPLE. I think I spelled example correctly. But that idea of what you do matters, that what you do has a ripple effect, that people are always watching and emulating your behavior. If one person comes in and sets a higher standard, that changes the culture for everyone. And if you can choose to be someone whose behavior is enthusiastic and positive and something that others can emulate and eventually build a far more positive culture, you've already had a huge impact. But if you're not in a position of authority, you don't want to necessarily hold someone accountable for some negative behaviors. What you can certainly do, though, is to take ownership of what you control. And rather than trying to change someone else, by changing and focusing on yourself and your example, you necessarily change their experiences through what they're seeing. And through that improved awareness, they ultimately will hopefully have different beliefs and behaviors and help to shape the culture with you.
Wow, that's a great step-by-step answer. Thank you, Sean. Another question coming in from Harold. Other than verbal compliments, are there other ways to provide positive reinforcement to our colleagues?
Absolutely. You may be familiar with the 5 love languages. That's something that's worked its way into a number of different corporate and other cultures, where people and teams will take the time to understand, whether personally or professionally, what is it that actually shows
love, care, concern, appreciation based upon your personality. Because some people like words of affirmation, some people like gifts, some people, there are a number of different things that people enjoy. And part of a really simple team building activity, and obviously I work with a number of groups, and whether it's a half day event or a full day event, we'll do personality styles. We'll actually work on communication improvement and leadership skills to build awareness, to give them experiences that do change behaviors. But one of the easier activities that I can incorporate sometimes into those event programs is something as simple as asking people, how is it that you prefer to be recognized? And different people like to be recognized in different ways, whether it's introvert versus extrovert. And I think that having an idea of what is, someone's favorite candy, what is someone's preferred recognition style? Do they want something in terms of monetary, or is it something that recognition is something that drives their behavior? So Harold, I think that obviously an incredibly important question that's going to be specific to your location, to find out if it's something other than words that your teammates value. What can you do to provide that, so you do continue to recognize what they're doing and make their very valuable contributions something that they feel is visible?
Makes sense. A question coming in from Philip: how do you gain back trust in competence when you might have stumbled and perhaps you missed a deadline, or produced a report that didn't have the right kind of data or information?
Well, I think that is a very important question, and something that is relevant to anyone listening, because the reality is we all have missteps. And I shared in the presentation, obviously, just little bits and pieces of what would be in my normal keynote or program. But I think the understanding that you have to be willing to be bad long enough to get better is a huge step forward in terms of not being paralyzed by perfection. Now, certainly there are some industries where perfection has to be the standard. If I am a surgeon, if I'm someone working in aerospace engineering, that idea of accuracy and perfection is something that lives right upon. And you want to make sure that every I is dotted and every T is crossed is better. But beginning in whatever industry, I think that part of your role is to go in recognizing you're not going to be the competent teammate your first week that you'll be a year later or a decade later. And so to give yourself permission to be a learner, to recognize that others are not expecting, in most cases, perfection. They just want you to apologize with effort. I never wanted anyone on my court as a teammate to pout. And I think that oftentimes as teammates, will pout and be sad about having made a mistake, instead of recognizing mistakes are part of the process of improvement. And if you're not making mistakes, oftentimes you're not trying very hard. So your job is to try and make a few mistakes, because the more mistakes you're making, the more effort and the more activity you're actually showing. And then when those mistakes invariably occur, can you apologize with effort? Can you make sure that you go back and explain or ask questions or remain curious and coachable, so that you are greedy and grateful for the input and feedback of those that you want to emulate as great teammates in terms of technical skill?
Sean, a question coming in from Thomas related to complimenting others. Is there a point in which I can over compliment others? How do you know when to throttle up or throttle down that old compliment machine?
No, I appreciate the question, and that's something, interestingly enough, I was actually just reading the other day about a study that was done on marriages. There's a gentleman, I can't remember his name, who said that he could actually, with about 90% accuracy, predict which marriages were going to succeed or fail based upon a 15 to 20 minute conversation that he observed. Here's what he was actually focusing on when he observed these couples, is he would look at the ratio of positive to negative interactions, whether it's words or body language. And I think that that's something that you need to focus on as a great teammate, because that's what you have, is basically a marriage that is a professional marriage, but one where you want to make sure you have a positive, effective, profitable ratio. You certainly don't want to be a Pollyanna who all you're wanting to do is to give compliment and become empty because I think that's what you're supposed to do. Sincerely invested and intentional about positives in your teams, they're going to appreciate the ratio that he shared in terms of his was shown in terms of positive to negative feedback in previous studies was, can you give 4 compliments? Can you give 4 positive pieces for every one time that you are helping to or some negative feedback or perceived?
So Sean, here's a question from Kim. And as you probably know, students who are coming out of college, they had a relationship with a professor, and now they're stepping into a business role where they're reporting to a boss. And many first-time employees, at least from my perspective, they kind of wait for individuals to tell them what to do, that they're really not sure what this whole corporate culture is about and how to interact with people. You have some advice that you might share with Kim in terms of how to interrelate and be more proactive as that first-time employee?
Absolutely. First, Kim, thanks so much for the question. Very insightful of you to recognize that there's going to be that need. And I think that you find that not just, again, in terms of athletics or basketball, but certainly in terms of any corporate culture. People are always going to appreciate a teammate that takes the initiative. And so in terms of building relationships, one of the things that you'll find is when you're first on a job, whether you have quality training or onboarding or not, there are going to be certain things that you're not going to know. So what can you do to begin to build relationships? Relationships are obviously the foundation of any collaborative conversation you have. They're going to help the team be more successful, but relationships are going to help you be more successful so that you understand what are some of the unspoken rules in that culture. What are some of the things in terms of the landscape that you need to be familiar with that may not have been part of that onboarding experience? And maybe most importantly, as Don had mentioned, what can you, by being more aware of that landscape, what can you do to take the initiative to help others? And if you're sincerely curious and you're sincerely intentional about being a winning teammate, when you look for opportunities to help others, you are necessarily going to end up helping yourself. People notice and appreciate those who notice and appreciate them. And so, what can you do as a teammate to make someone else's job easier? What can you do to take the initiative to assist someone or provide something that maybe they haven't even asked for, that you know from even limited experience that is a part of the process in their role? And I think that the more you're concerned with assisting and helping others to succeed, the more you necessarily will succeed. And you'll find that regardless of industry, that's going to be a huge truth that's going to move you forward in your career.
Very good advice. And kind of a follow-up question for myself. As a first-time employee, and I'm stepping into a new company and I may be at the water cooler, and how do I determine who those employees are that are toxic, that maybe I shouldn't be connecting with? They may be funny, they may be very communicative and reaching out to me, but what do I need to be watching out for so that I don't buddy up to someone who's already been identified within a company as toxic?
Well, I think there are a couple of things you'll look for. As a teacher, I was certainly sarcastic a number of times, and that was part of me being clever and engaging and entertaining to not just my classes, but to some of my peers. But I think that sarcasm can sometimes be a language of frustration. And if you have someone who is frustrated, that sarcasm can sometimes take on a negative tone. So you're going to end up hearing, or somebody will, while it's not an actual sign, they're going to hold up signs through what they say and how they say it. They're going to give you the indication that they are frustrated, that there is something negative about their experience. And just as importantly, and probably far more obviously, are those who are whiners and complainers. And one of the things that I've shared with athletes and with salespeople and with managers and teammates in a number of industries is that where you complain, you remain. And if you're not actually doing something differently, if you're just pouting or complaining, then you're wasting time and staying stuck where you're at. So as an employee that wants to be far more positive and take the initiative to be ambitious and to have an impact and be seen as somebody that is interested in climbing whatever ladder that you're part of, what can you do to, rather than complaining or being around those who complain, what can you do to actually take initiative and take action? And I think that people in whatever industry are always going to notice those who are doing versus those who are complaining. And if you'll kind of step back and recognize in whatever team you're a part of, who are those people that are complaining and who are the people that are doing? You want to be around the doers. And one last thing that I'll share with all of the listeners is that whether it's athletics or business or in any organization, hustlers dislike slackers and slackers dislike hustlers. And you know what you are by what you dislike. And if you're somebody who is a hustler, you're going to shun the people who are slackers, who are complaining and being stuck. And you're going to end up surrounding yourself with people who share that same ambition and drive to be successful.
Sean, great advice. We're so glad that you took the time to write the 10 commandments of winning teammates, and the advice that you shared with us today are awesome for us to start off our careers. Could you share with us again the text number that we can text for more information and to continue to study how to become better teammates?
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Don. If they would, I've got on the screen there, they can very simply on their cell phone or electronic learning device, text the word teamwork to 444-999. That will actually join them into my network where I will occasionally, at least once a month, send out information where they can be better teammates and team leaders. So we'll give them access to my toolbox of team resources and certainly the audio version of the book that they can listen to. If they wanted to actually purchase the print version, they can go online, find it at Amazon or on my website at greatresultsteambuilding.com.
Fabulous. And for all of our graduates, we encourage you to continue to work on your soft skills. And again, Sean, thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you. Bye-bye.